Hi there. In a previous video, I was showing how I can take a character turnaround that I've drawn in Sketchbook Pro and create these as my modeling templates in Maya. So in the previous video, I showed how I use Sketchbook Pro, which really can apply to any software that can save out each panel, and then place them in a new Maya project. So if you don't know how to create a Maya project, you can check out a video I created about creating projects in Maya to create this folder structure. You don't need all the folders necessarily, but if I'm creating a big project, it's helpful for these folders to be created and for Maya to know each one and what they're going to contain. So I have my empty scenes directory. I don't have a scene yet, but I did create the directory so I can bring these images into Maya. So you'll notice that each one I've got a front, a back, and a side, and I'm going to use these in image panes in Maya. So I'm going to switch over to Maya where I have a brand new scene, and I'm going to make a couple settings before I get going. So the first thing to point out, the scale in Maya can be changed, and depending on your workflow and what you're going to be doing with this, there's a few things that you might want to know to set up your model. So if you go to Windows and then Settings and Preferences, and then you're going to go to Settings, and you're going to see where it says centimeters. So right now, the scale in Maya is set to centimeters. So I'm going to actually switch this over to meters. For people who are working on models for a game, this might be compatible more with the game engine that you're using or the workflow that you're working in. So I'm going to then scroll out of here just so we can kind of see this, right? So now you can see the scale is a bit bigger. So when I create a new object, say I just kind of create a cube, and I go over to Polycube, if I got the attribute editor open and I go to the Polycube, you'll notice it's 1 by 1 by 1, right? So that cube right now is 1 meter. So I'm going to hit F, and I'm going to dolly out of this a little bit. So now we can tell that each one of these squares is 1 meter. So another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Display, and I'm going to go to Grid, and I'm going to go to the option box. Now in the option box, it's going to say that right now the length and width, right now since it's set to meters, this is 12 units. So right now since the units is set to meters, it's at 12 meters. So this whole grid right here is 12 meters by 12 meters. There are grid lines every 5 units. And the subdivisions are at 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the subdivisions to something that stands out a little bit more. These are going to be these subdivisions, so it's going to be 5 per meter. And then if I click Apply and Close, you're going to see that right now the solid line here is the middle, and these gray lines right here are the divisions, and then these are the subdivisions. So there's going to be 5 per. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that cube. I'm going to go to Create and Free Image Plane. And what this is going to do is it's going to set up a plane for me to add these images to, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply and close. But you notice it's pretty small. So instead of just hitting R for scale and scaling that up, which is totally possible for you to do, I'm going to keep my attribute editor open, and I'm going to go down to where it says image name, and I'm going to click the folder for that. And then in the open dialog box, I'm going to choose either my front, side, or back. So right now I'm going to choose the front because I want this to be the front view. And then I'm going to click open. Now in that, I'm going to scroll down. This is that image plane. I'm going to scroll down. It's going to say right now the coverage is 1024 by 1024, which is what I set my image size to. And then I'm going to set this width to 1 and the height to 1. And you'll notice that it just kind of scales up. Now, if I set this to, say, 6, just by 6, this is going to be a 6 meter square. So you notice that this supposedly is 6 meters, which is really a tall human to be modeling. So if I go down to, let's say, 2 meters, so that's going to be about 6 feet. And then notice that the grid is still quite large for that. I'm going to go to Display, Grid, go to the Grid Options, where it says it's 12 meters across this entire grid, which I really don't need something that size. So I'm going to choose 5 for length and width. So that's going to be 5 meters for the grid. And then there'll be grid lines. I don't want it to be 5 units. I want it to be 1 unit. And then subdivisions every one. And you'll see when I click Apply and Close that this will be a little bit better for my modeling. So I'm going to leave it at 2. Now this image center, notice how the image is centered, or the plane is centered on the grid. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into, this is X, Y, and Z, and in the Y, I'm going to go up half of the height. So if I enter 1, you'll notice now that plane is right there on the bottom of the grid. So now I can just press W and move this if I want. I can actually hit X on the keyboard and have it snap to the grid line. So I'm going to snap it there, right? And then I'm going to do another one. Again, create free image plane, and I'm going to go to the option box, and I'm going to go ahead and reset these settings and apply and close. Again, I'm going to go to the height and width. Now, there is a placement here. I can go to this size and this size, but this placement extras, the height in which works a little bit better in my opinion. So again, 2 by 2, and then I'm going to set this to 1. Scroll back up, go to the image name, click the folder icon, and then I'm going to select side and open. For some reason, it didn't keep my height and width, so I'm going to go back and enter 2 by 2. Could have been some mistake that I made there. I'm going to switch to, I'm going to go ahead and select that. Just make sure that I don't have anything selected in my window. I'm going to hit E on the keyboard. If I hold down J and rotate this, it's going to snap rotate it till I'm 90 degrees. I could just set that by going to the image plane and setting this to 90 degrees, but sometimes it's easier just to hold down J because it'll snap. Now I'm going to press W on the keyboard and I can move it again. I can hold down X and it'll snap it to the grid lines. Now I'm going to do one more. Select, go to Create Free Image Plane. I don't necessarily have to go to the option box, but I'm going to apply and close. Again, you could just go to Create and Free Image Plane. You don't have to go to the option box. I just show you that that's an option. Again, I'm going to click the folder icon, which brings up the open window again. And now I need the back. So I already had the front, the side, and now the back. And I'm going to open that. Again, scroll down to the bottom, set that to 2 by 2. It's set to maintain aspect ratio, so that was, I was actually entering it twice, but you only need to enter it once. And then set this one to 1. And again, I'm going to hold down X and have that snap to the grid. And now I'm going to do that again. I can set it right there so they're all equal distance apart. And now I can actually start modeling from these image planes. So I could just take a cube and I can look at that in terms of starting out my character with a cube. I could do it with a sphere. I can do it with a lot of different, there's a lot of people that start building models out of cubes, and I'm going to kind of use this same idea. So one cool thing about when you create construction objects in Maya is that you have a couple nodes here in the attribute editor. This pcube1, when I first created it, this is the transform. This is what moves it around in space. So translate and rotate and scale. This is the mesh inside of that. So these have a translate, that has a translate, but this one has a mesh, and outside of that is this polycube. And this is the construction history of that cube. So I can go in and I can make it higher. I can make it 2 units wide, or what I really want is 2 units high, right? 2 meters at this point in time. And then I'm going to add some subdivisions. I'm going to go for 4 by 4 by 4. And you'll see that it adds additional geometry to my cube that was only 1 by 1 by 1 in terms of the subdivisions, right? So I've added more subdivisions to that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down D and V, and what this is going to do is it's going to move this pivot point, and I can move it all the way down to the bottom, and again hold X and pull up with the move tool, and what that's going to do is it's going to place it right there on the grid, right? So D moves the pivot point, V snaps to points, so V snaps to one of these points here. I can even snap it to a corner if I want, but I have it set all the way down here and usually in the center. Right, so that snaps it to a point, and then X will move it without holding D, because D moves the pivot point. I don't want to move the pivot point, I don't want to move this, but I want it to snap to the grid. So that's how that works. Right, so now I have a cube that's about the same size as my character. It's a little bit taller, but now I can start modeling it out. I can start looking at it in terms of how do I want to model this character out? How do I want to build them out from this cube, right? So what I could do is narrow the width of it, right? And actually, I've got it set so the depth is actually the width here. And then I can start looking at the orthographic views. So I'm going to go over here to the orthographics. You know, if I use the space bar, I can actually switch really quickly over to each one. Right, so I'm going to dolly out a little bit. Right, so that's my top view. And then if I hit the space bar again and roll the mouse over this view, hit the space bar again, then I've got a dolly out a little bit. Right, there's my back view. Right, now what I want to do is I want to actually look at the cube from behind here. So what I'm going to have to do, I mean, I could do a couple different things, but I can set it up where I can see the back of the cube with this not in the way. I'm going to switch over here to, this is my side view, right? And there's my cube with my side view behind it. So what I can do is I'm going to go to shading, and I'm going to go down to X-ray. And what that's going to do is it's going to show me the cube that I could look through, right? It's like an X-ray looking through this cube, right? And then I can start modifying points or faces, and I'm just going to go and block it out. So I'm right-clicking, and I'm going to go to Vertex. I can drag these vertices down, right? And I try to work in groups as much as possible, but I can just frame it out. Like, I don't need to get too specific about everything yet. I'm just going to try to get these points as close as I possibly can to where they need to be. Right? I want to start working in major groups here. I'm going to go back to Object, Vertex. And I'm going to bring this one out. And then come down. So I could just start blocking these things out. Now, I'm probably going to get rid of some of this geometry. I might keep some of it. It really depends on what I'm shooting for in the end model here. But this will let me kind of at least get started in terms of making a basic shape, right? And then I've got the shoe down here. And I'll probably make a lot of modifications, but I'm going to spacebar out of here. I'm going to go over to this view, and I'm actually going to, let's go here, and I can actually drag this over. I'm actually going to, let me move it over on the other side so I can actually, for right now, I just want to see through it. And I'm going to spacebar here, select my object, and then go to shading, and then again X-ray. And now I can start looking at it and go to Vertex, and I can start bringing these in. Now I could just go to R, which is scale, and scale all these kind of points in if I want to, right? That's one way to work as well. I don't have to, especially since it's going to be the same sort of a mirror on each side, I can do that. And I can bring this in and scale that in, bring this in, scale that in, because I'm kind of duplicating it. I'm kind of mirroring it on either side, right? And then I have a basic shape of it. It's not going to be perfect, but I have the basic shape mapped out. And I'm going to go back to object mode, and then I can hit F on the keyboard and frame that up. And now I can see that I have a somewhat basic shape. I'm going to keep working on that. I have some lines that I kind of squeezed in a little bit too much, and I can see that there. And I can kind of fix these things by going in and I'll right click and go to Vertex, and I can dolly into this, go over here to this side, just kind of work, hold down Shift and then W, and I'm going to move that back. Now another thing that can kind of help you, because this is going to be symmetrical to start out with, and I can start building details after that, is I can go to the Move tool and I can change its options. I'm going to just double click. These are all the tools over here. This is when I press Q on the keyboard, that brings up Select, right? And then this is Move tool. So if I double click the Move tool, I'm going to get these tool options. And in the tool options, I can go down to where it says Symmetry Settings, and I can turn it on. And where I've got this right now, you can see the red right here is the X, the green is the Y, the yellow is the Z. And if I move this out of the way, you can kind of see it here, right? So that X is moving to the side. So I want to go to Symmetry, Object X. And now I'm going to close that. And when I do that, when I move one, you'll see it moves it on the other side, which is a great way to work when you're dealing with symmetrical objects, right? So I can kind of select that. There's a couple other techniques that I can kind of show that sort of help out. And one is if I need to select an entire line, I'm going to go to Edge. I'm going to also press Q on the keyboard, so I'm not on the Move tool right now. If I double click that entire line, it selects the entire edge. I can also right click, go to Vertex. If I select one point here, and I come over here and I double click, or I hold down Shift and double click that, it's going to select all the points in between. That's another good way of selecting multiple vertices. So I could select that one, come down here, hold down Shift, double click, and it's going to select those. It's still mirroring, so it's selecting them on the other side. So it's another good way to kind of work. You can also go to, say, Edge. I can select that edge. And then if I select Shift and double click that one, I'll select all those edges in between there. If I just double click the edge, again, it selects the entire loop, and I can move the entire loop. But I find that those are kind of helpful little tips to select multiple ones rather than just one at a time. And now I can just kind of modify this as I kind of go along to make sure that I'm getting the right shape that I need. I always want to kind of compare what I've got going on here in the model, right? A couple other things that you might want to know to kind of get you started is there's a modeling toolkit. And if you go over here to the tab way over on the side, it's actually up here as well. You can select this. You can bring up this modeling toolkit. There's a couple things that really kind of help out. One is a Multicut tool, which if I come over here and I drag this around, I can see actually where it's at between that point to that point. So I'm going to put that about, let's say 46, and then I can come over here and it's going to connect a line between that. Right? So that's one good way to create not necessarily a full loop, but I can start with one, and then I can actually complete that. If I hit return, I can actually do another one. I can select here, and then I can come over to here, and it's going to connect the two because, again, I'm working in symmetry. So there's a few things to kind of get you going. There's also another good tool is the Extrude Tool. I'm going to come over here. What I would really want to do is use the Multicut tool to kind of start here. Come over to here. And then I'm going to hit Enter. And then I'm going to base this on about where the arms would be. So a few other things about this Multicut tool that become really super beneficial is you don't have to just place lines in between certain geometry. You can actually insert edge loops. So I'm undoing to kind of undo what I did right there. And I'm going to insert an edge loop. If you hold down Control, you'll notice that it's inserting a whole edge loop. Now, the important thing to realize about this is it's not going to work where you have not a completed line. So if you go ahead and come up over here, you could see where the geometry goes all the way around in a loop right there. So it's going to insert an edge loop where I can do that right there. So you'll notice that as soon as I hold Control, it's going to move to a section where I'm hovering the cursor over. So I'm going to go ahead and insert an edge loop. I'm going to put one right here. And actually, I'm going to undo. If you hold down Shift and Control, you'll notice that it goes in increments. So it sort of snaps to certain increments between. If I just hold down Shift, you'll notice that it has a little dot there. It's just 50, it's 50%. It's halfway on that line you can insert. For every piece of geometry, it's just going to cut it in half. But the insert edge loop, if I hold down Control and Shift, it's going to snap it. So I can go sort of say halfway and then insert an edge loop. So this Multicut tool is pretty helpful in creating a lot of geometry. And then I can go to my side view, or front view, sorry. And then I'm going to move this just a little bit to, I'm going to hit Q on the keyboard. If you're ever in a tool and it doesn't seem like it's working the way you want it to, just go ahead and press Q on the keyboard, and that puts you back in the Select tool, and it deselects any other tool. So I did have the Multicut tool selected, and to get out of that, I just press Q on the keyboard, and I'm back into just the regular tools. Now I can go back to the Move tool, and I can start, moving some vertices around. One thing I want to point out here is I'm going to get something going here for this arm. So I want to build out the arms, and I'm going to base this on this front view. So I'm going to go back over here. What I could do is I could go to Face, and I could just grab this and extrude that. The problem with that is, though, when I go to Extrude, and I start pulling that out, I'm just going to dragging on top of thickness. It goes up at an angle. Now I can fix that and I can bring it down, but one better way to do that is to just make sure your geometry is straight before I get to that point. So I'm going to undo to get out of that. I'm going to right click and go to Vertex, or even better, I can come over here to this multi-component, and this shows you what I can select. So this is vertices, these are edges, this is object mode. So I'm going to just go to Vertex over here, and I'm going to select those, and I'm going to press W on the keyboard. And I'm going to press F to frame that up. So what it does is anything you have selected, it frames it up, it brings it into view. Now I can drag this out and keep this sort of straight out. But if I really want to be sure about it, if I want to make sure that I'm getting these points lined up, I can hold down V, again, that's snapping to points, and I just drag it in or out, and it's going to try to snap it. I'm going to try to snap it with that point. And the same thing here is if I keep pulling it out, it's going to snap to the next vertex that's out or in, right? So I'm going to try to get these to line up just by selecting them, selecting that vertex, and then lining it up. Now, I could just go to my side view, and I'm going to press F on the keyboard, frame that up. And then it is framing up the other side as well, but then I'm going to select one of these points. I'm going to hold down V for vertex, right? So that one's probably already snapped. I'm going to go to this one. If I pull it back and then hold down V, I can make sure that it's snapping properly, right? Do that, right? And so that should be now straight. So I'm going to go back to my perspective view, and it should be pretty much lined up. So it should be pretty easy for me to pull this face out. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go to face mode. And I don't have to, it was already selected, but I'm going to select it again. I'm going to go to the Extrude Tool, and I'm just going to drag out thickness. I'm just dragging on top of the label to drag that out. There is an interactive tool for that too, but it's on this side. I can just pull it out if I want to. But sometimes it's nicer to just drag on thickness and get that going out. So I'm going to go to my front view and make sure, go out a little bit. And then I'm going to drag that thickness out until I get that to the tip of the fingers. And then I'm going to do a little offset, which means it's going to taper it a little bit. And then I'm going to add a few divisions in there just to get me going. I'll probably modify that later, but that gets me to the point where I've got my arms blocked out and they're going out to the side. Again, the character is not fully flushed out yet. All I'm doing is blocking it out at first, and then I'm going to start adding details later. But that kind of gets you started and kind of introduces you to what's going on with just simple modeling tools. This modeling toolkit is super beneficial to quickly make changes, and there's a lot of other tools that I'll get into later. One last thing you're going to want to do is save this scene when you're done. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Save Scene. Since I'd already set my project, you're going to see it takes me right to this scenes directory, right? So I went ahead before I set this up and I originally created the project. And again, if you don't know how to create a project in Maya, I have another video that relates to that. But if you need to set it, you can click Set Project, and it brings up another window that's called Set Project, and you can choose whatever project you want. I could click Set. Again, it's going to take me right to the scenes directory. I can choose it right here, and I'm going to call my character Bob for whatever reason. And I'm going to make sure I save it as a Maya ASCII. Now, you can save it as a Maya binary, which makes it a smaller file, but a Maya ASCII it'll save it all as code and it won't be compressed. It'll make a larger file, but if something goes wrong, you could actually edit it. If you're concerned about file sizes and don't really care about modifying the code, you can save it as a Maya binary. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Save As. I'll be following up this video with another one to make improvements to this model, but I'm going to leave it right there for now. That at least would get you going with modeling in Maya and setting up the image planes and start to model from those image planes. I hope this helps.